Well guys, it's finally time to continue that yearly tradition started 2 years ago. And was this year better for films in general? Not really in my opinion. I think the last 2 years were just so good that we'd eventually have to get a year where things didn't match that level. That being said, there were still some great films that came out this year, and this video is here to highlight some of my favorites, in hopes that you check them out. Let's start then with number 10. My number 10 is A Different Man. Now for those of you who are a fan of the philosophy content I post on this channel, this one's for you. It's the story of someone with a facial disfigurement that undergoes surgery to get a Sebastian Stan face. This film for me looks at identity, and the role or maybe lack of role our outward appearance plays on who we truly are. Are we totally the results of our physical appearance? Or is it something more internal that makes us who we are? This film does a good job at presenting these interesting questions without giving a straightforward answer, which allows for different interpretations. Definitely a good film for those of you who are interested in the philosophy of the self. My number 9 film is Anora. So it's been a while since I've seen a movie that made me physically laugh. Like, you know how you might be watching something that's funny, and you recognize the cleverness of the comedy, but you just aren't laughing physically? Anora doesn't have this problem because the second act alone had me dying. It's the story of a stripper marrying the son of a wealthy Russian oligarch, and hijinks ensue. It's a comedy of errors. And yet, what separates this film apart from your average comedy is that it gut punches you at the end with arguably the best ending of the year for me. So if you're in the mood for a funny comedy that'll surprise you at the end, check out Anora. My number 8 is a surprising one, and that is Inside Out 2. Now Pixar's been through a rough time recently, and combine that with the fact that this is a sequel, and my expectations were low. But as someone who deals with anxiety, this film I think did a really good job at portraying it, and it was extremely relatable. Whenever a movie comes out about mental health, there might be a group of people that deal with that specific mental illness and say that the movie doesn't do a good job at portraying it. I don't think I've seen any discourse like that with this one. It seems as though everyone, including myself, agrees that the portrayal of anxiety here was not only accurate, but extremely creative. Especially that one scene when they're using imagination to think up worst case scenarios, that was spot on. There were a lot of great animation films this year, like Flow and The Wild Robot, but for me personally, I enjoyed Inside Out 2 the most. My number 7 is Dee Dee. You know how it's usually a good and fun thing to relate to a movie? I kinda hated how accurately I could relate to this film. This is the story of a kid entering middle school, attempting to be cool and fit in by doing what he thinks is cool, but ends up looking extremely cringy as a result. This was me a lot of the times throughout my middle school years, when I was trying to invent myself in a way that I thought others would find cool, but ended up just looking like a dork in the end. It's therefore kind of a tough movie to watch, but nonetheless really accurately done. Number 6 is The Substance. If you've seen it, you know I'm gonna have a tough time talking about this, as it's really a movie to be experienced. It's a body horror film where, like A Different Man, it touches on issues of the self, and the relationship between our outward appearance on the self. It just does it in such a unique, disgusting, but intriguing way. It's like looking at a bug eat another bug. It's so gross and yet you can't look away. If nothing else, this film is unique, and you haven't and probably will not see another film like this. If you're into horror, surrealism, and David Lynch, rest in peace, then definitely check out The Substance. My number 5 is a film that a lot of people forgot about, but that is Kinds of Kindness. This is the latest film by Poor Things director Yorgos Lanthimos, and it's an anthology of 3 short stories, all with the same actors playing different roles. What I like about this film, even to make me prefer it over Poor Things, is that you still get that weird and absurd surrealism that you usually get with his work, but it's more realistic, more grounded than something like Poor Things, which kinda takes place in an alternate world. This plays around in the real world, but still has some fascinatingly weird and bizarre scenarios. If you enjoy your weirdness still having one foot in reality, then check this one out. My number 4 is Nickelboys. This is the story of 2 boys surviving a reform school in the 1960s South and overcoming the racism, abuse, corruption, and torture of this reform school. Now this was a real place with well-documented torture and even murder having occurred here, the Florida School for Boys. But even with such a dark subject matter, the film is cinematically beautiful. What's unique about this film is that it's almost entirely shot from a first-person perspective. So you are these 2 boys' eyes experiencing all this firsthand. Obviously, you're not truly experiencing all the horrors of this place, but it's an extremely immersive experience nonetheless. Add to that some of the most beautiful cinematography of the year with that ending scene alone hitting me so hard, and this is a unique experience I highly recommend, especially if you have a chance to see it in theaters. Dune Part 2 improves upon the first in almost every way, creating an engaging epic with beautiful sounds and visuals, truly transporting you to the planet of Arrakis. Now, I never read the book, but I did watch the David Lynch Dune before this, and thought the second half was very lackluster. But here, you do have the fighting and the conflict, done much better by the way, but also the interesting character of Paul Atreides, who you feel weird about rooting for, but you still do. There's this religious aspect to the film that really elevated it for me, and brings up some interesting questions regarding the role of religious figures, their responsibilities, and their obligations to the people who support them or reject them. With Dune Messiah coming out eventually, I think this trilogy is going to go down as a classic in science fiction cinema, and anyone even remotely interested should check it out, after seeing the first one, of course. A lot has been said about The Brutalist, the new 3.5-hour American epic, a type of film we thought lost to time, like Gone with the Wind. I won't repeat the opinions praising the film as a monument to cinema, which it absolutely is. What I think isn't being said enough is the film's insight on the philosophy of art. Obviously, with a film this large, you could draw multiple interpretations, but what hit me was what it meant to be an artist, and specifically what it means to be an artist in a market economy. Should we make art for others, ourselves, or maybe for art's sake? How do we deal with the fact that art requires materials and resources, especially in architecture for this film? What sacrifices are we willing to take to get those materials and that time to create? Can the act of creating and changing the material world also change us as a result? The Brutalist is a film about an architect from Hungary escaping the Holocaust and fleeing to America, and his journey to continue his craft of architecture in this new environment. It may be intimidating with its runtime, but it's a deeply engaging and well-paced film, so I doubt you'd really feel that length. It's also beautifully shot with some of this year's best music in film to really draw you in. If it's playing near you, please consider checking out this film in theaters, as this film more than any other on this list truly deserves it. But even though this is the film I think you should check out in theaters before any other on this list, there's still one other film this year that I consider to be my favorite. Eventually this joke is gonna stop being funny. My favorite film of 2024 is Challengers. Who would have thought that the internet-dubbed Zendaya threesome movie would be my favorite film of the year, especially with it coming out so early. So why do I like Challengers so much? Well, for me, I love when a film is able to blend two genres masterfully, in this case thriller and romance. This was an engaging love triangle thriller, which had me hooked like a fish from start to finish. There was a point where I had to go to the bathroom and I lightly jogged there and back because I did not want to miss a lot. And can we talk about how this film is able to be so sexy without having any actual sex in the film? The sexual tension is so high, but so subtle, so internal, and the actors do a great job of having that manifest. It's one of the most erotic films I've seen even without seeing any sex. On top of that, we got some of the best cinematography this year with the tennis matches. I truly don't know how director Luca Guadagnino was able to get some of these shots. Like, how did you turn the ball into a camera? How did you shoot from underneath the court? It feels like we're defying physics at times. And let's not forget the pounding score, which perfectly fits this thrilling, fast-paced story. I still blast this soundtrack in the gym, to be honest. Overall, I'm a sucker for thrillers, I'm a sucker for good romance, I'm a sucker for good unique cinematography, so this film was a win for me. But hey, that's just my list. Let me know below what your favorite films of 2024 were. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button. Here's to The Brutalist doing well at the Oscars because those nerds didn't nominate Challengers for anything, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.